he playing Fluffals or something? No. Obviously he's playing the FLUFFAL engine, an engine that is somewhat niche but allows for light monsters to get in your graveyard. I summon Fluffal Penguin in attack mode. Introduced to the TCG back in late November 2014 within the set New Challengers, Fluffals are an archetype only rivaled by Ghost Tricks in terms of what decks guys try to get their girlfriends to get into when first starting out in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of the cute aesthetic it brings to the table. Consisting of fairy monsters of varying attributes, Fluffals work together in tandem with Edgent monsters, fusing together with the help of either polymerization or their own in-archetype fusion spell in order to create Fright Furs, the boss monsters of the deck. Most Fluffals rely on strategies revolving searching, swarming, and other effects primarily designed with the fusion goal in mind, whereas the Fright Furs primarily focus on battle-oriented effects. The Edgems focus on being scary. With the potential to dish out pretty gruesome OTKs, a cute but creepy aesthetic, and an overall interesting and combo-oriented playstyle, you may be asking yourself, how could this be an engine? Well, luckily enough, this fusion-based, aggressive, battle-oriented deck has gifted the world with none other than a draw engine to potentially abuse. I'm JC Theater Yu-Gi-Oh! And welcome to this week's episode of Engine Evaluation, Fluffals. Hey guys, before we get started on the actual analysis and going over the engine, I just want to make you aware that in the description below, I'm going to have all the cards that make up this engine. I'm going to have links to TCG Player where you can purchase these cards. So if I helped you out at all by letting you know what this engine is or introduce you to this engine and you decide to pick it up, consider helping me out by using the links I provide below, which gives me a small percentage of what you pay at TCG Player, which at no cost to you helps me out tremendously. So thank you so much. Now on to the engine evaluation. The Fluffal engine usually consists of a whopping 9 main deck cards and can get up to 12 for those daring enough. The first card in the engine and the play starter, the adorable Fluffal Bear. This cuddly fellow is a level 3 Earth Fairy with 1200 attack and 800 defense, so it's a good thing he's a combo piece and not something you're going to use in battle usually. There are 2 effects slapped onto this guy, one of them being super situational, but the other being super useful for the purposes of this engine. The effect no one cares about when playing this guy outside of Fluffals is that you can tribute him to add a polymerization from your grave to your hand. The effect you actually want to use, however, is that you can send him from your hand to the graveyard in order to set our next card straight from the deck to your spell and trap card zone. Toy Vendor is a continuous spell that lets you once per turn discard a card in order to draw a card. If that drawn card is a Fluffal monster, you can special summon any monster from your hand. But if it isn't, you have to discard the card you drew. And that's the engine. Thank you so much, guys, for watching today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. It's over. Just kidding. The beauty of Toy Vendor is his synergy with the third component of this engine. Additionally, when Toy Vendor leaves the field, you can add any Fluffal monster from your deck to your hand, which means you can search another bear and repeat this cycle over again next turn. The final card in this engine is none other than Fluffal Wings. This level 1 light fairy with 100 attack and defense is the heart and soul of this engine, but it's also the hardest piece to execute. You see, he must be in the graveyard in order to get off his effect, so you'll need to use Foolish Burial or Brilliant Fusion or even discard him to activate Toy Vendor's effect, whatever you can do to get him into the graveyard. Once he's in there, if you have a Toy Vendor on your field, you can banish Wings, then banish another Fluffal from your grave, which will be that bear you discarded earlier to get the vendor, and then you can draw a card. Additionally, you can send that face-up Toy Vendor to the graveyard after you do this to get an additional draw, as well as that search from the Toy Vendor. Once the Fluffal stars align by having Bear and Wings in the grave and Toy Vendor on the field, you'll be blessed with 3 cards being added to your hand, and that's what makes this engine so interesting and explosive. The final, very optional piece of this engine is the use of Fluffal Dog. This good boy is a level 4 Earth Fairy with 1700 attack and 1000 defense that lets you add a Fluffal from your deck to your hand when normal or special summoned. This helps add either Bear or Wings in hand to help give the draw engine more consistency. Of course, this guy also bumps the engine count up to 12 and wastes either a normal or special summon, so not many decks can make use of this seemingly pretty decent combo helper. The decks that come to my mind immediately when speaking of this engine, other than Fluffals of course, are those that need cards in hand and are able to counteract the size of this engine. ABCs only really need the pieces and field spell to maintain their basic strategy, and since their boss monster requires discard fodder, this engine seems to be a plausible addition to the deck. Another deck could be Herald of Perfection Cyber Angels. It can use the newly added Bear as fodder, and since the Fluffals are fairy type, they won't be dead and add another level of support when used in tandem with other fairy cards. With Construct unbanned, one can even run this engine with a SHADDOLL engine and use SHADDOLL Fusion to send Wings to the graveyard to help set up your plays along with getting a monster on field. Ultimately, if the deck has enough space and has some way of getting cards in the grave relatively quickly, the deck can run this engine. Now, if it's a question of whether or not it should run it, the answer is that it depends on how much hand advantage matters to the strategy you're already using. The Fluffal engine is a unique draw engine that adds explosive draws with the caveat of these draws being resourced from a relatively convoluted little combo that requires a little bit of outside assistance sometimes. If you draw Bear and Wings opening turn, you can pitch the Bear to bring out Vendor, use Vendor to pitch the Wings, and then use the Wings effect to gain the rewards. If this isn't the case, things can go downhill pretty quick, and that's the downside of the engine. Play this if you want to add a bit of spice to your deck, or I guess you could say sugar in this case because of how sweet Bear looks. Anyways, this has been JC Theater Yu-Gi-Oh! If you like this video, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. Also, while you're at it, check out my playlist for all the other engine evaluations. I'm sure you'll find something you like. Thank you so much for everything. See ya!